Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a rousing National Review welcome to our MC this evening, the Right Honorable Charles C.W. Cook.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to Florida. It's good to see so many conservatives gathered peacefully in one place. I think we're already well ahead of expectations. And Andy McCarthy, Jim Garrity, you can put down the tasers. I don't think there'll be any trouble. So on behalf of National Review, I'd like to welcome you all. Our research shows some of you are here tonight for the fellowship and for the company. Some of you are here for our ideas, our eternal ideas, and some of you are here because we make it almost impossible to unsubscribe, and after 3 decades you've given up and made your peace as a National Review guy. My name is Charles Cook. I am a senior editor at National Review, and I'm the MC for this, the 12th annual William F. Buckley Jr. Prize Dinner. I'm actually under a little more pressure than usual this evening as my 2 kids are here tonight. Hey guys. Yeah, this morning they asked me what we were doing here today, and I told them we were celebrating 70 years of National Review, one of the most important magazines. Thank you. One of the most important magazines in the history of the United States, a force for honesty, a font of compelling arguments, a key factor in the ending of the Cold War. National Review, I said, has been a friend to presidents, an enemy to collectivists, a constant skewer in the side of those who would sell our national patrimony for a mess of pottage. And my 7-year-old said, you know, that sounds really great, and then asked if there'd be cake. But no, they're wonderful kids. They're polite, curious, skeptical, sincere. They're all the things you wish for in your children, unless you're hopeful that one day they'll aspire to write for the New York Times. So the purpose of this evening is to honor 3 extraordinary figures of American conservatism: Governor Ron DeSantis, First Lady Casey DeSantis, and Art Pope. But before we begin, I would like to invite Father Robert Sirico to give an invocation.
My friends, as we prepare to invoke God's blessing on our gathering this evening, I hope that we will be mindful of the example Bill Buckley left us. Intellect joined to humility, conviction joined to grace, all with a great permeation of conviviality. Because the energy he exuded was so palpable in its effect, it's being felt even today. 2 decades, almost 2 decades since his passing into eternity. I suspect that there are many in this ballroom this evening who, when confronted and bewildered with the present moment in which we live, ask themselves, I wonder what Bill would say. In the agility of his thought, Bill Buckley sometimes surprised us. I'm thinking of his contrary position in his debate with Ronald Reagan over the Panama Canal, or his advocacy of the legalization of marijuana. He won both those scores, by the way. But this agility was not due to his mind being enamored by fads. It was a mind open to truth, which sometimes demands of us a reconsideration of our tactics and strategy. He was not capricious, even if he was not infallible. Rather, he was anchored in the permanent things that could indeed make him very predictable, or better, prescient. He was not necessarily, as I say, infallible in policy, but almost always in principle. Bill provided us with a kind of grammar by which we could understand each other in a comprehensible way in our conversations. He acted as a kind of magisterium for our movement, confirming the orthodoxy of one thing, while anathematizing the errors of another. In this regard, I think his excommunication of the conspiratorialists, the cultists, and the anti-Semites of his age only makes us long for him to be present once again. Ours is an age of division, not only in the civic, cultural, and political square, but within the conservative household itself. Buckley knew such things as well. He did not shrink from argument, but he sought always to civilize it, to remind us that truth and charity are not enemies, and that the life of the mind must be guided by the light of reason. On the centennial of his birth, the birth of our friend and our happy warrior, let us invoke God's blessing on our gathering, this meal, on our movement. Let us give thanks for so great an example of intellect joined to humility and conviction joined to grace. Let us pray now in the language that I suspect Bill would approve of. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Oremus. Benedict Domini nos et hec tua dona, quae de tua lagitate sumus sumpturi, per Christum Dominum nostrum. Amen. Good evening.
Thank you, Father. At National Review, we like to start every meeting with a prayer, and not just because each year our budget requires divine intervention. It's worked so far, but I'm told God's starting to screen our calls, so anything Father Sirico can do would be appreciated. And with that in mind, I'd like to introduce National Review and National Review Institute CEO to welcome us this evening. Please give a round of applause to Chuck DeFeo.
Thank you, Charlie. And I thank all of you for joining us here tonight. I'm deeply grateful for our honorees and for everything that you do to advance the philosophy of freedom. I've had the opportunity to meet so many of you and so many people across the country who choose to stand for truth and further the cause of liberty. But why do we do it? Why do we strive? Why do we sacrifice? Why do we serve? And for whose glory do we do so? In his essay, The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis explored this very question. For the Christian, he wrote, glory means a good report with God, acceptance by God, response, acknowledgement, and welcome into the heart of things. The door on which we have been knocking all our lives will be open at last. We are on this earth to serve Him, serve others, and God willing, to someday hear Him say, well done, good and faithful servant. This year, our movement and our nation lost 4 remarkable leaders. Leaders of whom I have no doubt have now stood before God and heard those words. We pause now to remember Lee Edwards, Ed Fulner, Charlie Kirk, and Karen Buckwald Wright. Their faith, courage, and friendship remain deeply ingrained in who we are. This tribute celebrates the lasting legacy they leave behind.
In your autobiography, Just Right, you write that you became a conservative because of communism.
True. It's true.
Bill Buckley, at the age of 29, said, we're going to do something about this. We are going to found a magazine, and this magazine is going to do for the conservative movement what the nation did for FDR and the New Deal and liberalism. We're going to mold and shape a conservative movement.
To have such giants as Bill Buckley, Ronald Reagan, and Barry Goldwater remains for us to be faithful to the foundation they laid down, a foundation of faith and free enterprise, which ensures that America will remain a shining city on a hill. Thank you all very much.
Ed Fulner is a big man, quite an imposing man, and has something of a command about him. You know, he's a little bit intimidating. Actually, he's a softie. And what I discovered was that he would constantly reach out and help me without being asked.
Some people might think that America's best days are behind her. I disagree very profoundly with that. We faced real problems in the past, yet our American spirit has always prevailed.
One of the neat things that Bill Buckley always did was he tried to add and multiply, not divide and subtract. He tried to find areas of agreement where he could, in fact, add and multiply instead of finding differences. One of my favorite quotes is the last phrase up from liberalism. Freedom is a means, not an end, and it's a means because I have obedience to the divine, because I know that the divine is there and that there are better things to come.
If everything completely goes away, how do you want to be remembered?
I mean, if I die?
If you could be associated with one thing, how would you want to be remembered?
We as Christians are called to go into the public arena to correct error with truth. So I go to college campuses and there's a lot of error. We're all sinners. We are all live in errors. I'm far more interested in what God wants of me than what I want from God.
Just humbled by God's grace. That's all I can say. I want you to remember that we did not earn this. This is God's mercy on our country.
I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. That would be the most important thing. The most important thing is my faith in my life.
You would be hard-pressed to find a more patriotic American than me. My grandpa Buckwald was born on the 4th of July in 1902. I was born on the 4th of July in 1954. My fourth son, Sam, was born on the 4th of July in 1992, the morning of my 38th birthday. Until the age of 4 or 5, I'm pretty sure I thought the big family picnic, the fireworks, flags, and all of that in Cleveland, Ohio was for our birthday. And I might have been a little bit deflated to learn we actually shared a birthday with the US of A. But that shared birthday has, in many ways, defined my life. I love America. I love its soaring ideals and its aspirations. I love its potential and the great good it has done for the world. Like Reagan said, it is the shining city on a hill. And liberty, as defined by this nation, under God with justice for all, is a song deep in my heart as it resided in Bill Buckley's heart. And I hope this love of country resides in your heart as well, and that you too will defend and support liberty, the soul of America, in every possible way for all of your life. Thank you.
This year we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the birth of our founder, William F. Buckley, and 70 years of National Review. The celebration has involved dozens of conservative organizations whose participation we are deeply grateful for. Those events led to multiple conversations about our movement, the principles of America's founding, and what we strive to conserve. It was during one of those conversations that I was presented with a question. Are those on the left classical liberals who simply come to different conclusions than we do? Or are we in a battle for the soul of America with an opposing ideology? While there is a pull to view our opponents as fellow believers in the American experiment, there is no other realistic conclusion than to see the opposing force for who they are. The battle lines are clearly drawn. Will we continue to be a society that believes in unalienable rights and knows that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is essential to a freer and more prosperous people? Or will we succumb to the left's vision of a larger and more intrusive state that no longer sees the need for the consent of the governed? The four leaders we just honored understood the battle we are in, and they devoted much of their lives to advancing the philosophy of freedom. And encouragingly, over 70 years ago, National Review's founder saw the challenge before us and took action. Writing in the early 1950s, he looked back on Franklin Roosevelt's presidency and saw the seeds of the opposition being sown. Buckley outlined the 1930s era policies of appeasement and economic integration with the Soviet Union, implemented with the support of intellectual elites in government and academia. Again, writing 2 decades later, at the dawn of the Cold War, Buckley described the result of what he described as Roosevelt's capricious act, writing that it was an invitation to the Marxist regime to, quote, set up in the United States hemispheric headquarters for the violent revolutionary movement historically consecrated to the encouragement of class warfare and racial tension, to violence, slander, infiltration, sabotage, and even to assassination, to bring about the only honorable goal in the Communist Code, total subjugation of the free world. Sound familiar? Over 70 years have passed since Buckley wrote those words. In the years since he founded National Review and helped forge the modern American conservative movement, one that stands for the cause of freedom and prevailed in the Cold War. We won, they lost. Yet, as Ed Fulner reminded us, there are no permanent victories, there are no permanent defeats, only permanent battles. The battle wages on, and our opposition on the left is not progressive. They are Marxists, intent on reshaping America towards their destructive vision. And anyone who claims to be conservative, who finds commonality with Marxists, authoritarian regimes, or with those who shout death to America, are not conservative or only asking questions. They are sowing the same seeds of destruction. We will again win out in this battle, not by abandoning our principles, but by embracing them and effectively expounding them. I cannot say it better than Hayek when he wrote, if we are to succeed in the great struggle of ideas that is underway, we must first all know what we believe. We must also become clear in our own minds as to what it is that we want to preserve, if we are to prevent ourselves from drifting. And our very survival may depend on our ability to rally a sufficiently strong part of the world behind a common ideal. No one ever rallied us better than William F. Buckley. In celebration of his centennial, I give you our founder and our indomitable editor-in-chief, Rich Lowry.
Well, my next guest is famous for his many things, his urbane charm, his intellect, his caustic sense of humor.
William F. Buckley.
We're very delighted to have you on the show with us tonight.
I hope that was a rehearsal. I'd like to hear it again. Answer, quote, yes. See, the trouble with you is that you get very resentful whenever anybody reminds you of what you say. If I said what you said, I'd feel the same way.
No. Are you saying the communists invented patriotism in Panama?
No, no.
Yes, well, you really tried to say that.
Before there was a conservative movement, there was Bill Buckley. He made it serious.
You like him, I assume, because he hates us.
He made it formidable.
Everybody's guilty of everything, then nobody's guilty of anything.
And he made it fun.
You would by the faculty of Harvard.
No, 2000.
In 1955, Bill Buckley gave conservatism a home and a voice. He brought together traditionalists, libertarians, and cold warriors. But the project was always about more than politics. It was about defending the spiritual and moral order that made America possible.
Whatever you say about the United States, we are still making some kind of an effort to keep a few people free.
Anti-communism was hugely important to him because it was assault not just on the West, but on the human soul.
It is true, or ought to be considered true, that communism has failed throughout the world, but nevertheless, it is manifestly true that a lot of people continue to support it for whatever reason.
He wanted to defeat it and crush it, defend our civilization, and to defend human dignity.
East Europe has kicked you out. We never kicked you out. The reason I'm a conservative is because I understand it to be realistic.
Bill saw the truth as a fundamental weapon in his fight against communism, because the communist system was based on deception and lies about the nature of its own system.
Any attempt to immanentize flower power is just going to lead you right to Buchenwald.
For Bill Buckley, communism wasn't just a rival system. It was, as he wrote, the most blatant force of satanic utopianism. He knew it was the defining struggle of the age.
To say that we in the Soviet Union are to be compared is the equivalent of saying that the man who pushes the old lady into the way of an oncoming bus and the man who pushes the old lady out of the way of an oncoming bus are both people who push old ladies around.
Bill Buckley believed the struggle between Christianity and atheism was absolutely central. The Cold War was an expression of that struggle. It was not that struggle in its entirety. He believed our civilization had Christian foundations. If we turned our back on it, we would undermine the West at its roots.
And I believe with James Madison that nobody is, quote, properly educated unless he first recognizes that there is a governor above the governor of the state. Now, if the state is going to become totalitarian, if it excludes the mere existence or the acknowledgement of the existence of that other order.
Bill thought faith was absolutely central to our public life.
It's part of Christianity that there is such thing as hell,
right,
and that there is a God erected to
and
you.
if you
but there's
don't...
also a God of mercy, and we don't know the extent to which the God of mercy overwhelms the God of record.
Doesn't mean that everyone has to be a believer. Doesn't mean that every conservative or contributor to National Review needs to be a believer.
I happen to believe, with the founders of our own republic, that any state is ultimately illicit unless it recognizes that other spiritual dimension.
For him, kind of the price of entry was understanding the Christian roots and appreciating the Christian roots of our civilization.
But man without God can have high ethical concepts.
Charity without the crucifixion is liberalism.
Bill Buckley's commitment to the market was not just about economics. It was about morality on multiple levels, including one, he didn't think the state had a moral right to fundamentally impinge on our property or our wealth making.
I have committed an objectively altruistic act for selfish motives. Why do you assume that there's an incompatibility between those two concepts?
Two, he realized that it's a fundamental part of human nature that we are enterprising beings. And also, it's a fundamental part of human dignity to take personal responsibility.
Of your kind of Democrat is one of enormous enthusiasm for federal handouts.
May I answer? Yes. May I?
Bill believed the market lifts up the downtrodden. It makes it possible for them to improve their lot in life.
$1.25 is too high. Let's shrink it down to 75 cents and ask whether or not people would be willing to wash dishes 8 hours a day for 32.5 cents an hour, as opposed to simply doing away with that 32.5 cents an hour, but enjoying the usufructs of idleness.
And very importantly, makes it essential for them to take responsibility for their own well-being.
As we have become a stagnant society.
You're making the point of counterproductivity.
I'm sure you'll have a piece of jargon for it.
Well, counterproductive, I don't think that's just an Americanism, is it?
In fact, we could, over a period of 20 or 30 years, reawaken in American citizens a sense of personal obligation. Might it not follow that they would then proceed exercising that responsibility to diminish the role of the government?
Bill believed that we're stewards, not owners of our civilization. None of us did anything to build Western civilization. It's a product of generations of effort, of thought, of argument, of battles.
Is everybody stupid who disagrees with you? Or give me
No,
one.
by no means.
Give me one exception.
Well, I don't even consider you stupid. I just
Just cruel.
I just think.
And the conservative attitude is that we are stewards, and we better be excellent and fierce stewards of that heritage.
Why would you call him Secretary of Defense? Call him Secretary of Undefense or Secretary of Surrender.
Bill Buckley believed in peace through strength, which fundamentally American concept goes back to George Washington. And the idea is your adversaries feast on weakness.
And to maintain that peace requires strength.
Bill Buckley believed we had a duty to lead. Controversial view at the time, controversial view obviously today. Doesn't mean we have to jump in with both feet into every possible intervention around the world, but it does mean that if we retreat, our adversaries will benefit.
Tear down this wall.
Bill Buckley didn't just found a magazine, he founded a movement. And he leaves us not just with his words, but with his spirit, a spirit of conviction, of wit, and of enduring belief in the possibilities of freedom.
Isn't one of our difficulties a certain lack of conviction, which I think is detectable in much Republican rhetoric? I think that the fact that the young Republicans tend to be, a majority of them, conservative, is something that the senior party ought not to get in the way of, because it's going to be very impossible, I think, merely by disciplinary action to simply overrule their own political predispositions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention. So my main goal tonight as MC, above all else, is to follow the first piece of advice that Rich Lowry ever gave me at National Review, which was, and I quote, "Just don't make it boring." Ever since then, this has rattled around my head every time I've written anything or said anything. Just don't make it boring. I'll do my best, Rich. So this is National Review's 70th year, as I mentioned earlier, and a lot has changed in that time. When National Review was founded, there were only 3 television channels, and they all leaned left, whereas today there are thousands of television channels that lean left. Just progress. 7 decades ago, we worried about Russian expansionism, nuclear war, the state of America's universities, the rise of conspiracy theorists, an overweening executive branch, widespread disregard for the Constitution, the decline of Western civilization. But thankfully, all those problems have now been fixed. And best of all, back when National Review was started, in 1955, our opponents were forced to counter our arguments by simply shouting, "You're a fascist," whereas now, well, actually, never mind. But we're still here. We're still here. We were told that conservatism was finished in the 1960s, it was discredited in the 1970s, it was corrupted in the 2000s, it was irrelevant in the 2010s, and dead again at last week. It has been a very lively funeral. But we're still kicking, and thank goodness for that. So one of my most deeply held beliefs, I write about it often, is that the lessons of history need to be relearned every 40 years or so, perhaps more frequently. As Chuck said, there are no permanent victories, there are no permanent losses, because human nature doesn't change, and because people need to be constantly reminded of what works and what does not. And since 1955, National Review has played that role, and since 1998, we've been led in that endeavor by our fearless editor, Rich Lowry, whom it is my great pleasure to introduce now.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I never thought I'd have to come before all of you as the editor-in-chief of a publication that is newly headquartered in communist-controlled territory. But here we are, and we didn't have to move to China or Cuba. It's kind of convenient in that way. But I fear that New York City is going to get reacquainted with the wisdom of Ed Koch, great mayor of New York City in the 70s, who, after he lost one of his bids for re-election, said, "The voters have spoken. Now they must be punished." So before I do anything else, I want to congratulate Aaron Rappa and everyone on the National Review Institute team for putting on another splendid evening. I also want to say there is one way. We have a lot of illustrious people in this room, but there's one way to know in Florida politics and in conservative politics that you are in the right room, that you are in the room, as I say, where it's happening, and that is if Gay and Stanley Gaines are there. Gay and Stanley, thanks so much for being here. We love you so much. So if you allow me a brief housekeeping note, I want to let everyone know that the National Review cruise that was planned for the Eastern Caribbean outside the territorial waters of Venezuela has been canceled until further notice. We fear the Office of Legal Counsel would deem lawful an accidental strike on such a boat if U.S. intelligence ascertained that Andy McCarthy was on board. And speaking of things that Trump is doing or does that are kind of controversial, if I could give Democrats a little bit of advice, it would be take it easy on the White House renovation thing and kind of tone down the level of outrage there, because you don't want to prompt the president to double or triple down. Because if they don't like the White House ballroom, they're really not going to like the 18-hole golf course on the mall. So, ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that at a time of ideological lunacy, when assassins are valorized if they have good abs, when Supreme Court justices can't define what a woman is, when Gayle King is considered an astronaut, at a time when the worst sort of panderers congratulate themselves on their supposed courage, at a time when the free market is under assault, yes, as usual, by the left, but also by elements of the right, National Review stands apart as a truly fearless voice of truth and sanity, as a defender of the constitutional order, even when it hurts, as a faithful friend of freedom, as believers in the proposition that we can take on the best arguments of the other side and prevail. And it has to be said, I don't want to venture into controversial territory, that also we like the Jews. We like the Jews, right? We ask questions to get answers. We do not ask questions to make dark insinuations about a religion, a great religion, that is an inherent part of Western civilization. And to give you an idea of how philo-Semitic the Lowry household is, my daughter, a couple years ago, she went to school, and the teacher asked the class, is there anyone here who is Jewish? And she raised her hand. Now, she did this because she didn't know what being Jewish meant. And in her defense, we go to an Episcopalian church, so there's no reason whatsoever she would know anything about religion. My son, he's a typical fidgety guy, and he said to me not too long ago, he's like, Daddy, the only part I like about church is the coffee hour. And I thought, son, you're a true Episcopalian. So, in conclusion, I just want to salute and express my profound gratitude for the foresight and fortitude. That's a little too loud now. I gotta start all over. Maybe go lower. Go. I'm gonna kill this last line. Anyway, as I was saying, I'd like to express I'd like to salute and just express the profoundest gratitude for the foresight and fortitude of our founder, and urge all of us to redouble our commitment to carry on in his tradition and build on his legacy. Thank you very much, and God bless America. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Ding, 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 ding. This is an ingenious contraption because it's angled at just the right position to stop me putting a glass of wine on it. Whoever designed it is brilliant. So last night's elections then. I'm not crying, it's just the humidity. Yesterday evening there were gubernatorial elections in New Jersey and Virginia. There was agreed, boo. There was a mayoral election in New York City. I've never been happier to be booed. And there was a redistricting proposition in California. Yeah. No, because this one will allow Gavin Newsom to do the good sort of redistricting. The one that saves democracy, not the one that attacks it. As you've no doubt all read, all of those elections went the wrong way, with perhaps the most alarming one coming in New York City, which elected a communist. Or as they say in Palm Beach, which elected a real estate opportunity. And having won, Zohran Mamdani finally dropped the soft-spoken act and started shouting aggressively about socialism and the Jews. But don't worry, that's never ended badly before. Now, worst of all, by a long way, I think, was the Democrats' candidate for Attorney General, Jay Jones, who won despite having been caught sending a series of text messages in which he hoped for the murder of his opponents and of his opponents' children. And our own Audrey Fahlberg broke that story. Now, in a more responsible era, Audrey's reporting would have ended Jones's campaign, his career, and his reputation within sane society. But now he will be the highest law enforcement official in Virginia. Now, unfortunately, Jones's victory meant he couldn't be here tonight, but actually, he sent me a text message. He said he's sad to have been unable to make this evening's event, but he sends his regards, and he hopes we all die. Except for Audrey Fahlberg. With Audrey, he says he hopes that... oh no, I misread it. He hopes you die as well, Audrey. But don't worry, it can get worse. I know Audrey well, and I know she's looking forward to covering the Democrats' likely 2029 Attorney General nominee in Virginia, Charles Manson. But look, this is bad, and we need to fight our way out of it. We need to keep working, keep arguing, keep doing what we do. We don't have to live like this. And with that in mind, it is my great pleasure to introduce Rick Graber, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Lynd and Harry Bradley Foundation. The Bradley Foundation has long been one of this country's most thoughtful and steadfast champions of the principles National Review exists to defend: individual liberty, free enterprise, constitutional order, and the strength of civil society. Bradley understands that sustaining a free nation requires not just good policy, but good citizens, strong institutions, and the courage to stand for enduring truths. Under Rick's leadership, Bradley has renewed and expanded its support for the organizations and the thinkers who keep our civic culture strong. Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Graber.
Well, thank you so much, and good evening. It's really such a privilege to join you for this evening's celebration of the incredible life and legacy of William F. Buckley, Jr. Thank you to National Review Institute for hosting this wonderful event that has truly brought together the practitioners, thinkers, writers, and visionaries of the conservative movement. And thank you for all the work that all of you do every single day to advance the principles of a free society. Tonight's especially meaningful because I have the great honor of recognizing not only a remarkable leader and philanthropist, but a trusted friend. As conservatives, we often wrestle with a simple but profound question: what is it we are conserving? Few people are able to answer that question simply by the way they live their life. Art Pope is included in those few. Art believes deeply in the power of free markets to improve human flourishing, and he puts that belief into practice. As chairman and CEO of Variety Wholesalers, he has grown a family business that began with just 5 stores into more than 620 stores across 17 states, employing over 15,000 people. Those stores provide essential goods, but more importantly, they provide jobs that instill self-reliance and a sense of purpose. Art believes in education, in the vibrant exchange of ideas, and he puts that belief into practice too. As a longtime supporter of the University of North Carolina and as a member of the University of North Carolina Board of Governors, Art holds institutions of higher education to account, pressing them to live up to their intended purpose as places of truth-seeking. Art believes that a vibrant civil society is fundamental to problem-solving in our communities. He also puts that belief into practice. As president of the John William Pope Foundation, he has directed more than $250 million to over 500 nonprofits that strengthen communities, advance opportunity, and sustain the institutions that make liberty possible. But what really stands out to me about Art is not just his commitment to carrying out his conservative beliefs, but the often quiet and unassuming way that he goes about it. I've learned this firsthand during our time together on the Bradley Foundation board, and particularly during his time as chairman. Art is always prepared, always steady, always willing to serve as a trusted sounding board. I know that whenever I need a second opinion before making a decision, one of my first calls is to Art. He's also always ready to roll up his sleeves and go to work. Art is as comfortable leafleting at a state convention as he is poring over legal briefs or board books on a Saturday morning, often, as I'm told, with Celtic music on in the background and Chuck Taylor Converse sneakers on his feet. He believes in articulating the case for conservatism through debate and discussion. To Art, opponents are adversaries, not enemies, and he will speak with anyone who's willing to listen. That openness explains why he's willing to take a call from a student journalist at the Daily Tar Heel, or even, and probably to the chagrin of his staff, Jane Meyer at the New Yorker. Finally, Art has a deep commitment to the values that his parents instilled in him, which is how he carries himself professionally, personally and philanthropically. Through it all, art remains a voice of reason for so many of us in the movement. In an era that prizes clicks, conflict, and noise, art reminds us that character is worth conserving too. And so in this year celebrating Buckley's 100th, it's more than fitting that Art Pope, a conservative of conviction and character, receives the National Review Institute's Leadership in Supporting Liberty Prize. Please join me in congratulating my friend, Art Pope.
I tend to think of Art Pope as an archetypal leader who speaks softly but carries a strong principle and backbone into the debate.
There are very few people who live their principles as consistently and courageously as Art does.
When Art walks into the room, he does not immediately go to the front of the room. He stands in the line with everybody else.
Art is a very detail-oriented person, and Art is somebody that when you work with him, you better be prepared.
At times I get enthusiastic and talk fast with a southern drawl, so don't hesitate to interrupt our motion, slow down. I learned my values from my parents, John and Joy Pope, growing up in a family with a father from the greatest generation, my mother who lived through the Depression. Your honor, your honesty is very important, but my father's work ethic, being an honorable person, and getting other people to trust him to do business with him, those were the examples and models that I saw and the values I tried to follow and adopt myself.
He has a lot of different interests. You know, he likes to hike, he likes to run track, he loves to swim, he loves UNC basketball. He likes Duke too, but his UNC's always number one.
I grew up working summers in the stores and distribution centers, so I knew what retailing, what a family business was really about. First and foremost, I give my father full credit for building the foundation of our company, the Rosa stores and the Pope stores and Maxway stores. He built the foundation. He was a true entrepreneur. But I was able to come in and learn from him, and he was able to hand off the baton for us to grow significantly with our acquisition of Rosa stores, a company that had been in bankruptcy. We were able to turn it around, save those jobs, and grow it.
He's committed to the communities that we serve. We were able to maintain approximately 5,000 jobs. By running the business the right way and being able to stay in business, we're able to bring value to our communities.
Retailing is, I think, the most competitive business there is, but we were able to carve out a niche where we can serve the communities, be able to afford the everyday necessities of life, making their life better by us providing it at a low cost.
As a public servant in North Carolina, he's fought to make government more transparent and accountable to the people it serves.
Art Pope has been so involved in the conservative movement at so many levels, but I know his first love is North Carolina, and his work in the John Locke Foundation has had a major impact on the development of conservative policy across that great state.
Civil society here in Raleigh and here in North Carolina is strong, at least in part because of Art's work. He has built a network and a community of people who care about free society, whether they are public policymakers, whether they're in the arts or in academia or in government.
Art was selected by Governor McCrory as his budget director, and he took on that role at a point in time when the state of North Carolina was suffering from about a $2.5 billion hole in the budget. Art took on that responsibility, worked with us in the legislature to find ways to balance the budget.
We did a great job in 2013 passing tax reform in North Carolina, which simplified and lowered everyone's taxes. But because we also controlled spending, we ended up having budget surpluses. So that made it possible for North Carolina families to retain more of their hard-earned dollars and still provide all the essential services that the state needs and provides its citizens. And I think that has served and can serve as a model for other states.
Art was involved in the efforts that took place to undo over a century of Democratic gerrymandering.
I was the lead plaintiff intervener in a case called Shaw v. Reno, which upheld that there could be racial gerrymandering. I was also a plaintiff in litigation called Stevenson before the North Carolina Supreme Court, which restricted gerrymandering. I've also had other successful court cases that I've been involved in.
Art has given his time and energy to causes that reflect his deep belief in liberty and opportunity for all. He's chaired the boards of the Institute for Humane Studies and Americans for Prosperity, two organizations near and dear to my heart.
I don't think you can think about the Tea Party movement without recognizing the indispensable role that our Pope played in those early days. Americans for Prosperity, under our Pope's leadership and generosity, literally brought together hundreds of thousands of Americans.
When we started the Pope Foundation, it was with my father's request to channel our giving. And from the very beginning, we given for humanitarian purposes, literally given to food banks, health care for the indigent, housing, education, and that's all very important, and we continue to do that. So our philanthropy is guided by both giving direct help to alleviate poverty, the symptoms of poverty, but providing for a society where everyone can prosper and be better off.
I've always marveled at the way where many people in the business world shy away from taking strong and principled stands. That's never been our Pope. He's willing to let his yes be yes and his no be no, to stand firm whether it was in North Carolina or help to lead and guide the conservative movement around America.
He loves family, he's a great husband, but his interest in business and public policy really kind of all combines together, because the public policy allows us in America to have the freedom to start a business and to run a business and to operate and to employ people and to provide goods and products that folks need and want.
I think Art gives as much as he can to every aspect of his life, and he involves his family in the work here. And obviously, the Pope Foundation is a family foundation. The tradition is being continued.
I want to continue to strive and work for and support others in doing, because it takes a movement, it takes people, not just one person. It's, again, preserve liberty, freedom for the individual and our families.
Please welcome the 2025 awardee for the William F. Buckley Jr. Prize for Leadership in Supporting Liberty, Art Pope.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Rick, for those very kind words, that very kind introduction. And thank you to the National Review Institute for this tremendous honor. It's especially meaningful this evening to share it with Governor Ron and First Lady Casey DeSantis. Governor, you have put into practice in Florida the very principles William F. Buckley championed. You are As Governor of Florida, you have been a national leader, especially in the time of COVID, so very much thank you for that. I stand at this microphone by myself, but this award represents the contributions of so many people who have helped shape my life and my career. As you saw in the introductory video, I've been blessed to work with many wonderful, talented individuals in retailing, in philanthropy, in public policy, and politics. They have shared a commitment of common principles. I must also, though, single out my wife, Kathy, and our children for their support, for their love, and above all, their patience, as I answered one more call to action, said we had to put forth another great effort. And there was another campaign starting. So I promised Kathy always it wouldn't take too much time from the family. This year marks the 100th birthday of William F. Buckley, and I cannot help but think of my own father, John W. Pope. As a child, I remember when my dad would turn on Firing Line with William F. Buckley every Sunday afternoon. And as a teenager, the first magazine I ever started reading on a regular basis were my father's copies of National Review. And I was a student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill back in the 1970s after the turbulent Vietnam War era. And I found an intellectual home in a broad-based conservative movement that included libertarians and traditionalists, champions of liberty and virtue, brought together under the principle of the Sharon Statement that was adopted at Bill Buckley's home over a decade earlier. These shared principles, the fusionism of the Sharon Statement, would guide me not only as I entered politics and public policy, but also in our family's philanthropy. One of the oldest sayings about philanthropy is give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. The second part is self-evident, and much of philanthropy is devoted to education and training. There are other additional variations of this saying. One says, help the man take his fish to the marketplace. There he can sell the fish, earn cash, buy a bigger boat, catch more fish, and then sell those more fish and better earnings, and buy a home for his family, provide for an education for his children. And they can go on to be fishermen if they choose, or engineers, or doctors, or discount retailers. And that way, the cycle of poverty is broken. But all three variations of this saying, give a man a fish, teach a man a fish, take the fish to the marketplace, presume something very fundamental, that the man has a right to fish, that he owns the fish that he catches, that there is a marketplace where he can sell his fish, that there is a rule of law that contracts are honored, so that when he is paid, he will have that money. And above all else, he gets to keep most of his own hard-earned money in order to provide for his family as he chooses. This is why our philanthropy focuses not only on humanitarian education, important as they are, and as you heard, we very much dedicate ourselves to those aid, but also on advancing the principles and policies of a free society that is both just and prosperous. The Polk Foundation and the many other philanthropies I've enjoyed the privilege of working with over the years, the Bradley Foundation, the Koch Foundations, last year's honoree Kim Dennis and the Civil Freedom Trust, we are helping people by fostering the voluntary exchanges of a free market economy governed by the rule of law and subject to a limited constitutional government. In fact, center-right non-policy groups, along with academic institutions and civic engagement, and yes, grassroots advocacy, must be supported by philanthropy if we are to preserve liberty in order to ensure the human flourishing and prosperity for future generations. Our shared principles, those in the Sharon Statement and the more recent Freedom Conservatism Statement, are deeply rooted in the American experiment itself. As we face an advance to the 250th anniversary, not just of America's birth, but of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, states the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, but among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is not the first time you heard those words this evening. It's not going to be the last time. We all know that these boldly stated principles were not fully applied or not fully realized in 1776 or 1876 or 1976. That is why I also honor and follow the words of Martin Luther King in his I Have a Dream speech. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, King said, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men and white men, would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It took many generations to redeem that promissory note, and the work is not yet done. During my lifetime, going back to the 1960s, I witnessed assassinations, riots,
the rise of what was then called the New Left, the folly of wage and price controls and stagflation, Watergate and other scandals, government waste, and a struggle against international communism, which literally could have turned nuclear. But thanks to intellectual leaders like William Buckley and the election of his good friend Ronald Reagan as President of the United States, our nation emerged from these ordeals with renewed strength, a robust economy, and as victors in the Cold Wars. And to those who think that Ronald Reagan is old hat, that Reagan conservatism is irrelevant to today's challenges, they are either ignorant or in denial of the times before Ronald Reagan and what Ronald Reagan did. Today, we still face challenges in America. Some new, others all too familiar. From reckless federal spending and deficits that make the 1980s look like the good old days, and the threatening rise of China, to technological disruptions, family breakdown, and political violence, including riots and the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk. Today, though, we face not only a progressive left, a self-proclaimed socialist left, seeking to use government power to impose their version of the common good, but we also face a nationalist populist right determined to impose its own version of the common good through the power of government. Rather than respecting the unalienable equal rights of the people, both camps, the progressive nationalist socialist left and the nationalist populist right, seek to impose government solutions, each confident that their camp will do the best job of governing. Neither seems willing to leave the Americans free to make their own virtuous choices. I firmly believe that the best way forward, the way to preserve and expand American greatness, is for conservatives to champion freedom and virtue, individual liberty and social order, and a limited but effective government that performs only those essential tasks for which it was designed. Beyond, we must not simply allow, but respect the rights, the freedoms of the individual, of the family, of the church and religious congregations, of communities, and businesses, institutions of civil society to function and flourish. Now, these ideas are not original to me. I did listen with my dad watching Firing Line, and you've heard many of these ideas today. But I do want to recognize, I think, 4 intellectual leaders' books that had a personal influence on me, and I think form part of the foundation of the classical liberal tradition, the modern conservative movement. The first is John Locke's Second Treatise on Government. Then we have Adam Smith and The Wealth of Nations. Also, Friedrich Hayek's And the Road to Serfdom. And the one individual who I was pleased to know in my lifetime was Milton Friedman's Free to Choose. Now, this path is not a single narrow trail. That is why I embraced the conservative movement as that was used and built by William Buckley. A movement envisions many people sharing common values and principles, moving in the same direction, united, but they may choose individual paths. Yes, we will debate and argue about which path is best, but to achieve a virtuous and prosperous free society, we must never lose sight of our common principles. Our disagreements should not become disagreeable. I never met Bill Buckley. I'm sorry I never had that privilege. But from my youth, watching Firing Line, reading National Review, discovering the Sheridan Statement as a college student, I admired the conservative movement that William F. Buckley helped create and lead. That movement, based on timeless shared principles, is needed now more than ever as the alternatives fails. We should all rededicate ourselves to this movement. That is why I am honored to receive the Buckley Award tonight as one small member of this great conservative movement. And Kathy, again, I promise you, this renewed effort will not take too much of our time from our family, as you and I will do it together. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's join together one more time to thank Art for all that he does. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Gay Hart Gaines, who has been, yes, we can do that right away, who has been one of the most energetic supporters of National Review and who actually served as the first chair of the National Review Institute. And as regent of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, she has helped preserve George Washington's home, reminding us that the work of stewardship, whether of a house or of a nation, is never finished. Gay has been a leader, a benefactor, and a friend to National Review for decades. So please join me in welcoming the incomparable Gay Hart Gaines, who will introduce Governor DeSantis and the First Lady of Florida, Casey DeSantis.
These lights are really bright. You know, this is such fun for me because I really loved Bill Buckley. I had a bit of a crush. It's okay, Stanley. It was just a crush. I traveled with Bill Buckley to Russia, to Southeast Asia, to China, and I hung on every word that man ever said. And I just knew he was probably the most fun and intelligent man I ever knew. But fun is important because Bill Buckley had a fabulous sense of humor. Now, I've got to find, if I can, what I was going to say to you. And I'm not very good with computers. And I don't know if my daughter Laura is here, but I can't seem to find my remarks. But just a minute. Oh, Lord. There, okay. Okay. I had the great privilege tonight of sitting next to our governor. And I have worked for lots of politicians. And I think, I can say this, honestly from my heart, that Ron and Casey DeSantis are the finest first couple of any state I have ever known. I love them, and I admire them, and I'm so grateful for all you do for we Floridians. All right, now yes, it's going to work. Ladies, years ago, Margaret Thatcher said to me, she said, "Gay dear, if you want to be happy, keep company with people of like mind." And remember that, because she was right. We're happier when we're with people who have the same goals and aspirations and dreams and loves that we do. When we're with people that are contrary, it's not very nice. As some of you know, not all of you, but National Review Institute was born in my sunroom at 1446 North Ocean Boulevard. We had invited this wonderful group of people. Lisa Nelson was the most important person. And Wick Allison and Dusty Rhodes, and they were all at my house to come down for a weekend of golf and tennis and fun. Well, it poured rain, and on the first Saturday, I said, you know what, let's just go in the sunroom and do something different. And we did. We went in the sunroom, and I said, we have to save the country. So this is the group that can do it. And I was serious. And I had the right group. I had Lisa Nelson, and thank you, Lisa. And I had that wonderful John O'Sullivan. Is he here tonight? I love John and Melissa. Anyway, so we decided we were going to save the country, and we birthed National Review Institute in my sunroom, and I suggested in the sunroom that we try to create an institute to spread the word of the National Review message and magazine to a wider audience. We agreed that if we could get Margaret Thatcher to help us, people might pay attention. And if we had Margaret Thatcher and William F. Buckley Jr., then we could have meetings in America and meetings in Europe, and we would get people to come. Well, I called Lady Thatcher, and she was interested. So off we went to London. She welcomed us into Downing Street, and Margaret Thatcher thought it was a great idea. And Margaret Thatcher was the reason we were a big success, right, Lisa, in England. And she came to every one of the meetings, and she would get up the first in the morning. She was always the first one down, fully dressed, pantyhose, pocketbook, hair perfect. And she'd say, "Hey, dear, where are all the people?" I said, "They're going to be down. They come a little later." But then at night, when we would close up, she would be having her brandy, and all of a sudden, at 2 in the morning, everybody had left. I'd be sitting with Margaret Thatcher, and she said, "Gay dear, I think we're the last men standing." I'd walk her up to her bedroom, whatever great family home we were in, one of those wonderful homes, and she was always the last to go to bed and the first to get up, but she was always, to me, the most interesting person I could spend time with. I adored her. Okay, so I suggested to my little group of friends that turned out to be National Review that we would meet in the sunroom, and we would chair the meetings in England and Europe with Thatcher and with Bill Buckley in the United States. And that was the beginning of this wonderful organization. And it really makes me happy to see you, and it really makes me happy to have the governor here, because when I first met Ron DeSantis, I recognized he was special and that he was of like mind. Our governor is brilliant. He's not like the other governors. He's brilliant. And he's the exact opposite of politicians who are dangerously dumb. You know who I mean. Ron DeSantis has an uncommon courage. As a champion of civics education, our governor knows that when Florida leads, America wins. It went off my screen. So, where is Ron? Governor, you and Casey are really an inspiration to everybody in Florida. And I know that you're so young and your future is so bright, and all of us in this room are grateful you're here tonight and thankful for your leadership and excited to know what you're going to do in the future. National Review has a great future. This is a wonderful meeting. I hope you all come back next year because I live right next door. It's really easy. And thank you for your commitment to the principles of William F. Buckley Jr. I will tell you one fun thing. I was in Russia with him one time, and we were sitting at a table, and we were talking with Gerasimov. And he said to Bill Buckley, and Bill Buckley had his little, he always took his computer, he was typing because the articles were going back to New York, and he was typing away, and Gerasimov said, "Communism is dead." And Bill's eyes went, and his tongue went, and he was typing. And that was true. Gerasimov told us they were no longer going to do any trade with Cuba, and communism was dead as far as he was concerned. So a lot of the reason that our country has been so successful is because of William F. Buckley Jr., his policies, his writing, his brains, and his convictions that helped lead us to where we are now. And thank you, all of you, for being here tonight. I'm really happy to be here with you. Bye.
Freedom! here in our great Sunshine State of Florida.
I've always been a Republican, but he's really taught me how to be a conservative. And I've always learned and watched him for years about how he leads from a very principled perspective.
I take it upon myself to protect Floridians from the pathologies of the left.
The cells that are coursing through his body believe in freedom.
In economic freedom, we rank #1 in education freedom.
It's candor.
Yes, he's in decline.
It's conviction.
Yes, it's a danger to the country.
It's the courage to stand alone if necessary.
If you're trying to deny kids a proper in-person education, I'm going to stand in your way, and I'm going to stand up for the kids in Florida.
He's comfortable with people's ideas, whether he agrees with them or not.
What makes him so special is fearlessness. His ability to take an issue and then go after it.
When you're chasing Jewish students around, that's not free speech. I mean, that's harassment.
He isn't afraid to get in the arena and fight.
In the last 10 years, we've had a 45% decline in homelessness. California's had a 45% increase in homelessness.
And it should make everybody appreciate how strong of a backbone he has to be able to stand up for what is right and what is true.
And he's not going to back down, not from the left, not from the media.
You asked the question, I'm going to answer it.
Finish my
you're
question.
not, no, you're giving a speech. You asked the question.
It's the old story where fate whispers to a warrior and says, hey, a tremendous storm is coming, be careful. And the warrior whispers back and says, I am the storm. That's Governor DeSantis.
Many of you may or may not know I was diagnosed with breast cancer. It was the end of 2021 in
Casey
October.
DeSantis, I really enjoy working with her. She is very, very motivated about health issues.
I'm a cancer survivor, so we've really tried to reframe and relook how we're investing in research and unique approaches.
Thursday, Florida's First Lady was bagging groceries, not for the First Fam, but for Hope. Hope Florida. That program you probably heard about, but maybe didn't realize was helping thousands of Floridians.
So we started this in late 2021, full scale through the Department of Children and Families, and we wanted to think differently about how we were helping people in need.
It was a way to better connect those in need with the private sector, nonprofits, especially faith groups.
And I've done things with mental health, resiliency. We've reframed it in the state of Florida, so we really try to empower kids to learn how to persevere through life's inevitable challenges.
She has, such vision, and she has the vision because she has the passion. So it's just been a tremendous pleasure to work with her on these issues.
Florida, of all 50 states, we are fortunate to have the best First Lady in all 50 states.
When people ask me about the governor and the First Lady's relationship, the very first thing that comes to my mind, they're just great partners, they're great friends.
Well, first of all, I mean, this guy's the GOAT. Like, honestly, everything that he says he's gonna do, he does, right?
I've never once seen them have anything but a wonderful conversation, a productive conversation, a loving conversation.
She should be governor after that.
Governor DeSantis and his wife Casey are a dynamic duo. They truly are. They work collaboratively in many things. To watch them be moms and dads out there on the world stage, but standing resolute together and having each other's backs is incredible.
If we have a chance, if we are to be blessed with the opportunity to maintain this country, this greatness that we have here, believe me, it is not possible to do without the leadership of people who truly embody and value the importance of freedom.
Let me invite the First Lady of Florida.
To see him and Casey working as a team, it's an example for all of us. They have each other's back, they have our state's back, and they fight every day to be better parents, better leaders, and better citizens of this country.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna fight for your family, we're gonna fight for our family, and we're gonna fight for America going forward. I never thought in a million years that I would ever be in a position to get an award like this. So it's extremely humbling to be amongst some of the folks who have received it. It's very special, and I hope to continue to enact good policies aligned with good governance, conservative governance, limited and defined government, to hopefully make a lot of people proud.
Please join me in welcoming one of our 2025 awardees for the William F. Buckley Jr. Prize for Leadership and Political Thought, the First Lady of Florida, Casey DeSantis.
Thank you. It's an honor. First of all, I just have to say about Gay Gaines, and Stanley Gaines, they're dear friends. They are incredible people. And I can tell you this without a shadow of a doubt, Ron and I would not be here if it were not for their contributions to be able to help support him along the way and everything that you've done. To be honest, when I heard that I was getting this award, I said, "Are you sure you have the right DeSantis?" I was like, and then they said, yeah, no, you're going to get the award. And I said, this is great because I can come and talk to somebody older than 5, which is really exciting because we have an 8, 7, and 5-year-old at home. And, an interesting story is, so Mamie, she was born, if you can believe this, during the 15 days to slow the spread. Do you remember this back in 2020? It's kind of like a blur. And now she's going to be 5 years old. So imagine what this was like when Mamie was being born and Ron is on the phone bickering with Fauci, which I was in support of, but I'm in the delivery room and I'm trying to have a baby. And I'm like, great. And so, but that's kind of been her introduction to the world, started with that. But now she's in kindergarten, and it's amazing to me just how quickly these last 7 years, if you can believe that, since he was elected, have just flown by. And you really think about it, I remember back in 2018, remember how that was such a nail-biter of an election? That governor's race was determined by 32,000 votes in a state of 22 million people, teetering on the brink of a radical leftist agenda or a bold conservative vision. And when we reflect upon that election here in Florida, it was probably one of the most consequential in Florida's history. Imagine what this state would look like today had the Democrat opposition won at the time. But winning the election is important, but it's not sufficient. It is what matters. What is consequential is what you do with the opportunity to lead when it is presented to you. See, I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second because I'm excited to be here and they gave me a microphone. And again, I'm talking to people older than 5, which is awesome. So I've watched a lot of politicians over the years, a lot. And for a lot of them, that's their goal, is to win the election. They want the position, they want the prestige, they want the power, maybe they want the parking, maybe they want the payoff. It's about ego or entitlement, whatever it may be. A lot of times it's about advancing themselves and not the will of the people. They want to be somebody, but don't have the courage, the backbone, or the will to do great things on behalf of the people, because true leadership is tough. For a lot of these politicians, standing up for righteousness, even if you're standing alone, is a bridge too far. And for some, there's no money in standing up for the right thing, and that is why the swamp is able to thrive. But when you are guided by certain enduring truths about our great American experiment, you understand the boldness of our Declaration of Independence, the genius of our Constitution and separation of powers, the philosophy of what it means to have a limited and defined government, the importance of the rule of law, and the non-negotiable understanding that our rights come from our Creator and that government is put in place to protect the rights that we innately have. When you understand that, and this is not going to sound First Lady-like, you'll fight like hell to protect it. And honestly, that's what I watched from the better half, from Ron. Fearless, courageous, unwavering, unrelenting for you, for me, for us, for families, for the free state, and ultimately what it means to be an American. And I'm not saying this because of my wife. Trust me, because I could have complaints about him bringing cookies home at 8:30 when I'm trying to put the kids to bed. But it's me saying this as someone who has had the very privileged and unique position watching one of the greatest governors of our time stand in the breach and fight when others took the path of least resistance. I've seen him fight a lot of battles in our time, and I'm still watching him fight battles, like one on property tax. You wouldn't why does that have to be a fight? And why is that a fight with Republicans? That should be low-hanging fruit. Everybody wants property tax reform. But issue after issue, from Martha's Vineyard to COVID to parental rights to universal school choice, I've watched this state transform into a conservative bastion of sanity and freedom. And the governor has really given me the opportunity to lead and spearhead initiatives really rooted in conservative principles. For instance, with Hope Florida, Pathway to Prosperity and Economic Self-Sufficiency, we've really reimagined and rethought how we approach welfare by incorporating the private sector, the nonprofits, the faith-based community to utilize and maximize resources exterior of government to help struggling Floridians. We have transitioned off more than 33,000 people from government assistance. That is saving the taxpayer over $100 million annually and over $1 billion over the course of 10 years. And as a result of this philosophy, I could stand up here and tell you more statistics, but one I think is very impactful. We have reduced the foster care population in this state since he took office by 47%. We believe that every life is a blessing. Every person deserves the opportunity to live up to their God-given potential, to be self-sufficient, to be happy, to not be stuck in a demoralizing culture of government dependency. And I'll spare you with a long-winded analysis of how Hope Florida operates and how we make it all come together, and we help guide people to economic self-sufficiency by using all of the wickets that are available, whether it's state government or local government, or like I said, the nonprofits and private sector. It's a really magical thing, which I think is a model for the nation, and it's thriving here in the Sunshine State. But let me just say this in closing. No matter the issue, no matter the policy proposal, there is a sense of pride, no matter where I travel, here across Florida and across the United States of America and beyond, when people say, I am a Floridian. Because being a Floridian symbolizes freedom, liberty, sanity, strength, success, and hope. People all across this world look to the free state of Florida as the shining light on the hill. A shining light that we must protect and one we must never take for granted. And let's make one thing clear. We would not be the free state. We would not be number one in so many categories if it were not for the courageous leadership of Ron DeSantis. On one of his final shows and one of his final broadcasts, I'll never forget, Rush Limbaugh said that Ron DeSantis has an ironclad spine of steel. And that is true, because you can hit that guy over the head with a 2x4 and he will just keep walking. He fights for what he knows in his heart to be true, and he does it without skipping a beat. Because at the end of the day, that's what elected leaders are supposed to do. Articulate your vision, explain why it matters, explain who you're fighting for and why. Have the strength and the courage to defend it, and never let the fear of pushback derail what you know in your heart to be right and to be just. And that is what I have witnessed from Ron DeSantis, who I will say is my best friend, my hero, and the GOAT. And with that, I will introduce him.
Well, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the free, red, and conservative state of Florida. You know, when I first ran for Congress years ago, I did a fundraiser, and the host of it, or the special guest, was Lou Holtz, a famous football coach. And he did this introduction, great guy, but a great speaker. He did an introduction and turned it over to me, and I resolved I will never go after Lou Holtz ever again. And while I love my wife dearly, I hate having to go after her because she's so good at what she does. I want to thank Gay and Stanley Gaines of all the people that we have worked with in politics. I don't think you're going to find a better couple, and they're dear, dear friends, and probably some of the best friends we have in politics. So God bless both of you for that and all you've done for so many years. So I was watching last night's election, especially in New York City, and it brought to mind a debate that three of our founding fathers had. And it was a debate between Dr. Benjamin Rush, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin. And the debate was about what was the world's oldest profession. And Dr. Rush, being a physician, said, well, the world's oldest profession is the physician, because it was the doctor. Eve came from Adam's rib. You had to have a doctor do that surgery. Thomas Jefferson, who people know, designed Monticello, University of Virginia, said no. The world's oldest profession, it was the architect, because it was the architect that brought order out of all the chaos in the universe. And Ben Franklin said, no, that's not right. The world's oldest profession is the politician. Who do you think created that chaos in the first place? Well, I think we're going to get a good reminder of that over the next 4 years in New York City. And I don't know whether I need to build a wall at I-95 or build more. I don't know, but I know I know it's going to be very impactful, and we're going to get a very good lesson of history that leftism, socialism, communism is always doomed to fail. Now, when I was last with National Review for the Palm Beach event you guys do, it was to honor, Gay was one of them, and the other honoree was a fellow that we miss dearly, Rush Hudson Limbaugh. And so, you know, I gave some introductory remarks. It was my first year as governor, and I made the statement at the time, and I think it's true, and I believe it to be true. You know, if you look at kind of modern conservatism and the modern conservative movement, I would say post-World War II, the 5 most influential conservatives have been Ronald Reagan, William F. Buckley, Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas, and Rush. At least for me, that would what it would be. And Rush was very thankful for that. You know, Rush was very humble. That was rarefied air, but he was very influential. We really miss him dearly. Now, I didn't know when growing up, I didn't know who William F. Buckley was. I didn't even know the difference between Democrat and Republican, to be quite frank. And then I show up, having grown up in Dunedin, Florida, my freshman year of college at Yale University, you know, on the baseball team, and I showed up because this is what we would wear in Tampa Bay, flip-flops and jean shorts and a cutoff T-shirt. That did not go over well with the Andover and Exeter kids, who were a little bit different. That's okay, you know, culture shock. But I started going to school, and I was like, wait a minute, you know, and I'm thinking as 18 going there, I'm like, man, this is like, you know, a great school. All these great leaders have come from there. The motto, or one of the motto, is for God, for country, for Yale. I'm like, man, so I go there. And after like a few weeks in class, I'm like, for God, they hate God, they hate America. And I'd never seen anything like that. And people like, yeah, you need to read William F. Buckley, God and Man at Yale. And sure enough, he kind of nailed what was happening throughout the society at that time. And I think it's only gotten more serious since then. Now, the famous quote from William F. Buckley was that National Review would stand athwart history and yell, stop. And that was obviously something that needed to be done because you did see the advances of leftism. I had to approach things as governor a little bit differently because if I simply was content with stopping the left, that would have conceded that the left had control over every major institution in our society, and I was not willing to concede that. And so I didn't think it was enough to simply, in our day, stop the left. I thought that I must lead the effort to regain terrain and to make sure that we can restore the integrity of all these institutions in our society that have been corrupted by the left over the year. Our K-12 education system, our higher education system, even corporate America at the time, the bureaucracy, and on it goes. And so that was the task to make sure that we were protecting the people of this state from the pathologies of the left. And that required aggressive action, and we did. And now we delivered great results. And ultimately, when you get elected, you know, most voters would never come to a National Review event. Or on the left, they go about their lives. They're not as ideological. They're not following this every day. So the results are important because that ultimately what determines the direction. And if you look at what we've done, no state has delivered more conservative results than we have in the state of Florida. Just take our budget. The state of Florida now has almost 23.5 million residents. New York is the closest to us in population. They're about 19.5 residents, and yet, with millions more residents than New York, the state of Florida's budget is less than half of New York State's budget. Yet our roads are better, our schools are better, everything's safer. In fact, New York City, 8 million people, their budget is more than the budget of the entire state of Florida. And that doesn't even count Mandami socializing the grocery store, so that's going to get even more. If you look at what we've done in the state of Florida, state for 180 years, take all the debt that the state government has accumulated over that time. Just since I've been governor, we've paid off almost 50% of the state's historical debt. We now have the lowest per capita debt of any state of the country. Economy, we are now ranked 3 years in a row by CNBC, the #1 economy amongst all 50 states. Trust me, CNBC would not want to rank Florida one if they can help it. And if you look at the amount of income and wealth that's moved into Florida since I've been governor, there has never been an example where more wealth and income have moved into another state over a similar period of time in all of American history than is what had happened in Florida over these last 6 years. Taxes. We have no income tax, and we never will as long as I have anything to say about that. And so it's interesting, California has the highest income tax, but they also have the highest sales tax. Our sales tax is 33% less than them, and yes, we are working on putting something on the ballot for our Florida residents and their homesteaded properties to actually make sure you own your home free and clear of the government without them using it as an ATM. So stay tuned on that. Our K through 12 system, Florida has the #1 school choice in all of the United States of America. We have 1.7 million students on various school choice programs. Some of it's private scholarships. Yeah, we've got over 500,000 on that. But we also have charter schools, which are public schools. Then we have choice within our school districts. If you just take our charter school population, it's about 400,000 students. That's more than the total K-12 population of half the states in this country. And this is disproportionately low income, demographically different than some of the other parts of the state. But if you just took those 400,000 charter students and did their performance, they would rank in the top 5 for student performance if they were their own state in this country. And that just shows you that what we're doing works. Law and order. We have a 50-year low in the crime rate in the state of Florida. And I'm the only governor in America that has removed Soros-backed prosecutors from their offices. We have fought the left in our higher education system, and they just did rankings in the Wall Street Journal based off free speech, lack of ideology, all the things that we want schools to be graded on, and University of Florida ranked as the #1 university in this country. And it's because we've really leaned in on the reforms. And oh, by the way, first state in the country to eliminate DEI from our higher education system. And I think the only state in the country that to this day, all tenured professors now must undergo review every 5 years and can be terminated for poor performance. I got elected very narrowly, as my wife mentioned, and the state has always been viewed as purple, and yet we did what was right, and we enacted the strongest pro-life protections that have ever been done in the state of Florida's history, and we enacted the most sweeping parental rights legislation of any place in the United States. Every parent in Florida has a right to send their kids to elementary school without having them be taught that their gender is a choice or that they were born in the wrong body. We've been the most aggressive state in America on combating illegal immigration. I had boats down in the Florida Keys because Biden wasn't doing his job. We sent people to the southern border to help Texas. We even transported 50 to beautiful Martha's Vineyard. And And they said in Florida you couldn't be strong on immigration because we have a high Latino population. And I parlayed that in 22 into the biggest victory with Hispanics that any Republican has ever had in state history, 62%. We also nuked things like ESG and woke capitalism. The reality is you have a responsibility as a publicly traded company to maximize the value of your shareholders. Going on ideological escapades, and we even had to stand up to a company that's got a pretty well-known reputation in Central Florida, and we stood up and we won that battle. And now woke capitalism is on the defensive. So those are just great achievements. It's made a difference in people's lives, but it's not just about even doing that. We haven't just won superficial victories. We have neutered and defanged the left in this state more than has ever been done in any states. Just look at what we've done with teacher unions. Yeah, we have universal school choice. Yeah, I made sure kids were in school during COVID, but we also instituted paycheck protection for teacher union dues. No automatic deductions. You got to write a check if you want to do it. And guess what? Most teachers are not, and these unions are being decertified all across the state of Florida. Trial lawyers boondoggle with what they do, and Florida was one of the worst states. They funnel the money to Democrat politicians. We did massive tort reform. It's changed the trajectory of the state. I'm actually now, these insurance companies are rebating, like Progressive's doing $1 billion, all this stuff, and it was all because we got the litigation under control, but it's also deprived the left of a key source of revenue. Higher education, what we've done to make sure that we're filtering out professors. You know, we filtered out a lot of these activist professors, and the media will say, oh, there's a brain drain from Florida, professors are leaving. Let me tell you, if Marxist professors are leaving Florida, that is not a bad thing for Florida. That is a good thing for Florida. We enacted the strongest measures for election integrity in the country. And, you know, a lot of people forget Bush versus Gore, they remember 2000. It was a total Charlie Foxtrot. I got elected in 18. My opponent conceded on election night. I was winning by 1%, which is a typical Florida margin at the time, 80,000 votes or whatever. We had U.S. Senate race, some of these others that were less, and they didn't get called. And so, you know, I'm going about my business. Hey, I just got elected governor. Next day, I'm going out. Then next day, I get a call. Palm Beach and Broward are putting more votes in. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, you went from 80,000 to 60. I was like, wait a minute. Then you go to 40, then 30. So when I came in, we removed the supervisors of Palm Beach and Broward counties, and we enacted an office in state government that actually prosecutes voter fraud. So if you vote in two places, if you're an illegal alien, all that, we've got you and we're doing it. And then, so we've been, and I'll talk about the political success in a minute, but by the time we got to after 22 when I got reelected big, you know, we had decimated the Democratic Party. So they didn't really have an avenue. We had defanged the left in the state. And so the avenue that they sought to try to change Florida was through these constitutional initiative process. And so they put on the ballot, and these became the two most expensive initiatives in the history of the American Republic. Amendment 3, which was a constitutional right to smoke weed wherever you want, and Amendment 4, which was abortion till birth and allowed abortions to be performed by non-physicians. So really as radical as it do, and if those would have passed, that would obviously have changed the underlying dynamics in the state and ultimately would have turned Florida purple and then blue. And so combined, the left spent $275 million to try to change our Constitution and really change the trajectory of the state. So as governor, I didn't have a formal role in it, but I fought like hell to be able to do it because I'm thinking to myself, what good is it to go through this, win elections, do the policy, if they can just do Soros's agenda through the back door with these initiatives? So we were the first state to beat a marijuana initiative, and we were the first state to beat an abortion till birth initiative in 24. We beat the left at that. Very important. So what's the result of all this? And I think it's important because, you know, a lot of people, these political consultants will say, and I got this advice when I got elected, hey, it's a purple state. You know, you got to be careful, right? It's a very delicate balance. Almost every election for a decade or more was at one point in Florida. And they're like, you know, if you're too conservative, you know, you're going to end up repelling voters. And like, you know, I understood that, but ultimately I rejected that. And the reason is I got elected to lead. I didn't get elected to follow. And I've never taken a poll the entire time I've been governor. You know, part of it is because what's the poll going to tell me? The poll can't change what I believe, so I got to do what's right. I got to set the course, and I deliver results. And even if the people weren't with you at the start, and they weren't with me during COVID at first, very unpopular, the decisions I was making, and yet, you know, now no one will admit they opposed me during those early days of COVID, right? So that's just what it is. So you can't get caught in the moment. You can't be afraid of your own shadow. You have to do. But what it's shown now, when I got elected, we had 300,000 more registered Democrats in this state than Republicans. The state of Florida had never had more registered Republicans than Democrats in its history. By the time I ran for re-election, we had flipped that. 300,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats. Oh man, isn't that great? And we were able to win with that 300,000 registration advantage by a record 1.5 million vote margin, the largest Republican victory in the history of the state in a governor's race. And that's great. And we won majority of women. I won single women, which they say you can't win as a Republican. We won 62% of Latinos, all this other stuff, and independents, all this stuff. Today, though, so I think like my election was like, you know, is this really real in Florida? People didn't know. Once that big election happened, then it was kind of the floodgates. So it was 300,000 advantage then. Today it's 1.4 million more registered Republicans and Democrats. We've never had a shift that far in favor of Republicans over that period of time in modern American history. Get this, you know, because a lot of my supporters are worried about, man, yeah, we love what you're doing, but stop attracting people here. You're making it too. And all of a sudden I said, well, listen, I'm not asking anybody to come here. I don't go recruit because, like, honestly, businesses call me and they want to come, all this stuff. So I don't do that. But there's a concern. I remember during COVID, we had this massive influx. We're seeing New York plates, which in Palm Beach you normally see. We started seeing California license plates. That freaked everybody out. They're like, oh my gosh, we're going to import Buckley to Sarasota? That is not going to end well for us. And so it was, you know, it was a 1-point state, so if you get that. They would even go to the supermarket and they would put flyers. These are like my supporters. They put flyers in the windshield with the New York and California plates. Don't vote here like people vote there. And like, so there was a big concern about the migration shifting the state more liberal. Here's the fact. Since I've been governor, if you look at all 49 other states and you take each state individually, all 49 states, if you look at who's moved from Florida from there, have had more Republicans than Democrats move to Florida. Vermont, New York, Illinois, California, Washington State, it doesn't matter, all 49. And so it has actually helped facilitate, you know, more conservative governance. And get this, it wasn't just migration. People that were Democrat in Florida when I got elected were 3 times more likely to switch to Republican than vice versa. That's how we won Miami-Dade by double digits. That's how I was the first Republican to win Palm Beach in 40 years. So, but it's important to know how we did that. We did it by flying under a banner of bold colors, not pale pastels. As President Reagan said, we drew a sharp contrast with the left, and we made it very clear that voters had a very stark choice, and they chose us 60-40. There's a lesson in that. People don't want milquetoast. They don't want poll-driven politicians. They don't want people that are afraid of their own shadow. I do things as a leader that some people don't agree with, but they know I'm leading and doing what I promised I would do, and they respect that. And that's how all these Republicans should act, and they would do much better as a result. So the thing about Florida is, you know, William F. Buckley, the debates he's having with these leftists through the years, all this stuff. We just had, particularly since COVID, a real-world experiment between conservative governance in Florida and leftist governance in California, in Illinois, in New York. And the results show undeniably conservatism works. When it's properly applied, it delivers positive results for the people that we were elected to serve. And you cannot dispute the results. The results not only statistically, but even close your eyes to all that. People vote with their feet in this country. They have fled those leftist states, and they have sought refuge here in the free state of Florida. So the question is, what do you take from that going forward? And I will say, I see some of the stuff that goes on now in whatever kind of the right-wing echo chamber or echo sphere is, and it brings to mind an old adage that all great causes start as a movement, transform as a business, and ultimately degenerate as a racket. I think we're in the racket phase of a lot of what's going on in the right. Are we believing in conservative principles because they're true, or are we shifting those principles to try to catch fire with the Twitter algorithm or to be able to monetize the advocacy? And so I think we've got a lot of work going forward to make sure that these principles are upheld. And so some of the things I would say, one of the secrets to our success is we cede no issues to the left. We offer conservative solutions for every issue that people care about. Take environment and conservation. You know, the left is all about saying the world's going to end because of global warming or climate change. You know, I have my staff collect throughout history. CBS News, 1977. The state of Florida is projected to be underwater by 1985. No, it didn't happen. 1989, ABC News. The state of Florida is going to be underwater. No, it doesn't happen. So, and interesting, Bill Gates has now said, oh, you know, climate alarm, don't worry about that, you know, or maybe, you know, because he wants more energy for his data centers and the AI stuff. So it's convenient. I guess saving the world can wait. They got to do more profits. But we've seen them go kooky on that. We're very strong on energy. We eliminated any reference to climate ideology in our energy policy. But what we did do is we are succeeding in creating the largest environmental restoration in the history of the United States by restoring Florida's Everglades. I'm getting that done, not the Democrats. I'm doing it. And people appreciate it cross-party. You look at education. We did the universal school choice. I believe in that. But I also know that most families in Florida, even with universal choice, still choose to go to a public school. And so as we're marginalizing the teacher unions, we created a special fund for teacher salaries. Because, you know, you say teachers need more, you send money, they spend it on bureaucracy. We made sure it can only be spent on teacher salaries. So now those teachers that want to go in, they're thanking us for being able to support, and that's charter school teachers as well. So we beat the left on education. And as my wife said on child welfare, you know, we know that these great society approaches don't work, and so there's a temptation to just say, yeah, and hit it, we don't like it, yeah, fine, but what's your alternative? And so what she did with Hope Florida was recognize we have so many resources exterior to government. So when somebody now goes in for child welfare services, their needs get put into something called the care portal. We have churches that are plugged in, charities, businesses, individual volunteers. Guess what? When that needs goes out to the church, if the church is there to lift somebody up, that's not creating a dependency culture. That's creating a culture that's going to lead to independence. That's why we've gotten 33,000 people off means-tested welfare. We didn't cut, quote unquote, any of the programs. We've transcended the need for the programs and done better than the left has ever been able to do. The other thing that's important to do as conservatives is we must be firm in rejecting big government. Now, we see Mendami last night say there's no problem too big for government that government can't solve, and no problem too small that government shouldn't have its beak in somehow, and which brings to mind President Reagan, the most terrifying words in the English language, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So we know that that doesn't work. And if you think about why those voters were felt disenfranchised, why they voted the way they did, some of it's just the education system. There's a lot of people complaining about affordability. Why do we have issues with inflation and affordability? Because of the government, because of the COVID spending, because of the Biden stimulus, because of the lockdowns and the supply chain disruptions. Government, big government policy has created the crunch that so many people are feeling throughout this country. So let's recognize that that fails and not repeat these mistakes. You also look at the size and scope of the bureaucracy. Now, President Trump is right to reinsert control over the executive branch. The founders created 3 branches of government. You're either in the legislative branch, the judicial. If you're not in any of those 2, you got to be in the executive branch. The president has every right to make sure that those bureaucrats are faithfully executing the policies of the administration. I know there's going to be stuff in the courts that are going to come out, but having a 4th branch of government is not consistent with our Constitution and what the Founding Fathers envisioned. And I'm glad that we finally have a president that's trying to do something about it. The other thing we have to say, because you're starting to see this, there's just a Wall Street Journal, OpenAI wants federal backstop for all their data centers. How about this? No. No more too big to fail. We are not going to let them say they're systemically important, that the taxpayers have to come bail them out, privatize gains and socialize losses. That's how you end up electing more Mendamis, and conservatives need to stand against it. The other thing we have to make clear is, we have a very dangerous world. And I think William F. Buckley was very clear-eyed on this because, he didn't embrace military adventurism. He didn't embrace socially engineering foreign societies like we've tried to do, over the last quarter century, and we shouldn't do that. And we got to be very judicious about how we utilize American military might. But you have to have a foreign policy, and you have to understand that the way to deter conflict is through strength. And if there's times where you have to act like President Trump did by taking out the Iran nuclear reactor, you do it, and people will be safer as a result. We are inviting less conflict when we're strong. Immigration. There's a lot be said about illegal immigration, stop the border, do the deportations. We're obviously supportive of that. We created Alligator Alcatraz, and we got these other things, and we've led the nation in that, and we're happy to do that. And, honestly, a lot of these people have already been ordered to be deported through the immigration system. They've had crimes, all this stuff, and so it's the right thing to do for Floridians. But we can't also, as conservatives, say, oh, yeah, all illegal immigration is bad. All legal immigration is good no matter what. No. Immigration, if it benefits the American people, fine. If you're doing things that are displacing jobs, if you're doing things that are detracting from culture, that is not. There are great things to have Elon Musk having got a visa, to have an O visa for Shohei Ohtani. Yeah, I'm all for that. But do you want to do mass importation of people that elect representatives like Ilhan Omar? That is not good for the American people. We need people that are culturally compatible. As Teddy Roosevelt said, we have one culture. It's the American culture. People that come need to want to be a part of that culture, not want to detract from that culture. And I think that that's very important, and it's very intellectually lazy to say that every single legal immigration program is benefiting the American people, because we know some of them have undercut Americans. Now, we're supportive of one culture, this whole idea of, diversity is the strength or whatever. Look, I believe you can be a great American coming from different walks of life, but you got to want to embrace the American creed. You got to want to be a part of our culture. So it's a cultural thing. It's not saying that you're this color, you're that color. We're not going to go down the road of kind of this warmed over anti-Semitism. That's a dead end for conservatism, but we do need to have assimilation, we need to have a unified culture, but ultimately, as conservatives, we treat people as individuals, not as members of groups, and that has got to be the way going forward. The final thing that we need to grapple with is what is going on with artificial intelligence. And I don't think it's a conservative approach to say that Silicon Valley should simply be able to run wild. They are seeking unprecedented special privileges and special favors. They had a provision that got stripped out to have a 10-year moratorium on any regulation by the state government, stripping our right to be able to protect Floridians. They're getting unique tax and regulatory breaks all across the country. So just understand, this is not purely market-driven. This is driven in large part by rent-seeking, and now you have OpenAI saying we need a federal backstop for all the stuff that we're doing. That is not the way to go. We must say no to too big to fail. We must make people rise and fall based on what they're doing. But there is going to be need to make sure that individuals have protections. I mean, think about National Review. There's people in this AI space that don't believe in copyright. They think they should just be able to take this, no IP, no copyright, and be able to put whatever they want in their models. I don't think that that's good for this society. I think the founders put copyright in the Constitution for a reason. We have to be able to do that. You also have just the backdrop of what the Founding Fathers were trying to do when they created this country. And when they framed the Constitution, they were very concerned with concentrated power. Now, in those days, they were not thinking about technology companies, artificial intelligence. They were thinking about government power and what government could do. And so they wanted to make sure they understood human nature is what it is. It doesn't change. There's nothing new under the sun. People are apt to abuse power. So you divide power in different branches. You create checks and balances. We are now in a situation where some of these big companies, the market cap in NVIDIA is more than every GDP in this world, except like 4 or 5 companies. You have some of these others that have more power than governments have ever wielded in many aspects of American life. And so I think it's important as conservatives that we make sure we're steering things in ways that will enhance the human experience, not supplant the human experience. We cannot relinquish our responsibility to think for ourselves. We cannot let a handful of people in Silicon Valley create an alternative reality that distorts what it means to be an American and be a citizen of this republic. This is kind of in its opening stages. This is going to continue to be a major issue, but I can tell you in the state of Florida, we're going to make sure we're standing up for individual freedom and individual rights, and if they come asking for special privileges for us, they are not going to be warmly received. So we're here on the verge of America's 250th anniversary, and we're getting ready to celebrate that in July. In fact, Gay, she used to do the thing at Mount Vernon. She got us a George Washington statue that I put in the Florida Capitol. You know, a lot of these blue states are taking down statues of the Founding Fathers. I'm here putting them up in different parts of Florida. So we got the Washington. I've got Ben Franklin in Franklin County, Florida. I've got Jefferson in Jefferson County. I'm working on Hamilton. And, you know, we're buying these at a discount because they're in the basement in these blue states. It's great. Like, you get Hamilton for $30,000. It should cost more. So we're doing all that. And actually, I told New York, you know, Mindami wants to take, and I know it's not the Founding Fathers, but it led to the Founding Fathers. You know, if he wants to take down the Columbus statue, I will take it in Florida, and I'll put it up here somewhere. We'll do it. We'll get it done. But as we do that, I think it's important to reflect, and I want a lot of young people to reflect. That's why we're working really hard in Florida. What did the Founding Fathers do? What does the founding of the United States of America mean in the broad sweep of human history? And I think it's one of the most significant events, certainly in the last 2,000 years. You think about it. When they went to Independence Hall to sign the Declaration of Independence, these people had everything to lose. They were very successful. They were movers and shakers in the colonies. The things they were objecting to were more principled than anything. I mean, honestly, those taxes now, we wouldn't even think, you know, matter. It was relatively small compared, but it was a principle. And they thought that if they let the camel's nose under the tent, that they wouldn't have freedom. So they stood and they signed and pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, knowing full well that if their revolution failed, the result, 100% for every one of them, was death. And so this was the real deal. This isn't just emoting on social media. They took a stand knowing there would be serious consequences. And they turned, really, the vision of government on its head. No, power doesn't come from the government to the people. Power comes from God to the individual, and then the people loan that power to government to protect the rights we already possess. Huge revolution in thinking. And then they won the war very improbably, and then they're kind of sputtering, so like, you know what, we need a constitution. So they meet in Philadelphia again, 10, 11 years later, and they work and hammer out this constitution. And so after that, Benjamin Franklin's walking out of Independence Hall, and he's asked, Dr. Franklin, did you give us a republic or a monarchy? And Franklin's response was, a republic if you can keep it. They understood you could have the best constitution in the world, you could have the best Declaration of Independence in the world. These things do not run on autopilot. They require every generation of Americans to step up and defend freedom when it's threatened, sometimes even putting on a uniform, risking your life, and even giving the last full measure of devotion for service to this country. So the experiment in liberty is ongoing. We're constantly answering this question that the Founding Fathers asked themselves. Can people really govern themselves? Can you have a society in which the rights are God-given, not government-granted? Can you have the rule of law rather than the individual man? Can you actually have limited government? And they believe, and I believe, the United States of America will ultimately answer that question once and for all. So we are called upon, in my role, what we do as governor, what National Review does, what other folks throughout the conservative movement do, we're called upon to preserve what George Washington called the sacred fire of liberty. That was the fire that burned in Independence Hall in 1776 when these brave men signed the Declaration of Independence. It was the fire that burned at a cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in 1863 when our nation's first Republican president pledged this nation to a new birth of freedom. It's the fire that burned on the beaches of Normandy when a merry band of brothers stormed the shore, defeated Nazism, and helped save the world. It's a fire that burned at the gates of the Berlin Wall, which we saw there when a brave president stood up and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. This is the responsibility that we have as Floridians, as Americans, to carry that torch and to preserve that sacred fire of liberty. I don't want to speak for anyone. I miss Rush dearly. I miss William F. Buckley. But I think both of them would look to the state of Florida and say, you know what? You guys are doing it right. You're showing that conservatism is the way to go. So thank you all. It's an honor to receive this award. God bless you, and enjoy your time in the free and red state of Florida. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Governor DeSantis and First Lady Casey DeSantis. So, as Casey DeSantis said, those of us who live in Florida are proud to say we are Floridians. This is personal to me. 8 years ago, with 2 little kids in tow, my wife and I drove down for the first time to our new home in this state. We got our new Florida driver's licenses, we got our Florida license plates, we got the complimentary concealed carry permit, golf cart, and fireworks coupons they hand out at the state border. And we became the new residents of this state. And as soon as I crossed the border, I became that most delicate species of American, a Florida man. And like every Florida man, I own 3 prized possessions. I have a beach chair, I have a hurricane plan, and I have a story that begins, I swear to God, Marilyn, I thought the alligator was asleep. Like every Florida man, I measure success by how far the news helicopter can follow me, which is why the Florida man is the only type of American whose natural predator is the news cycle. But seriously, this is the best state. I'm sorry for those of you who live elsewhere. I'm probably going to alienate most of the room, but it is the best state. And my first ever vote as an American, I became an American citizen in 2018, and my first ever vote was for Governor DeSantis. But I'll be honest, I didn't know quite how much it would end up mattering. Now, as Governor DeSantis said, he won that year by 32,000 votes. It was close enough to warrant a recount. I followed that recount closely. I watched it keenly, and I was, of course, very hopeful that Governor DeSantis would emerge victorious. But I can also remember thinking that because a lot of the great policies in Florida are in the state constitution, because the culture of the state is what it is, that it wouldn't be the end of the world if it went the other way. But I was wrong. 2 years later, COVID-19 came along. And Governor DeSantis' leadership proved not only crucial for Florida, it proved crucial for the United States as a whole. We have a lot of friends where we live in Northeast Florida who moved from New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and elsewhere, simply because Florida was such a beacon of light during COVID. And this is a story that my wife and I heard in disbelief. One family we're close friends with now, they said they knew it was time to get out of Philadelphia when, during a lockdown-breaking trip to the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A, their 4-year-old said quite earnestly that he was having the best day of his year. And at that point, they looked at each other and they said, this is just no way to give our children a childhood. And 3 weeks later, they moved down to Florida. As we've heard over and over again this evening, policy matters and politicians matter too. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Brian Murdoch, the National Review Chairman of the Board of Trustees.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Does that work? That works. So I brought my own champagne. It's like my American Express card, never leave home without it. Charlie was right, there's no place to set this down. How can we be an advanced civilization if they build a podium without a cup holder? All right, my assignment is briefly to wrap us up for the evening. So I thought I would start first and foremost congratulating once again our honorees. Please join me in a final round of applause for Mr. Art Pope, Governor Ron DeSantis, and First Lady Casey DeSantis. I also think I should provide a thank you to people who helped put this together. I know Rich Lowry did a shout out to one of them, and I thought I really should mention what we call the Coalition of the Willing, who will put this together. I know you're thinking, Brian, you know, how hard is it to throw a black tie, intimate dinner party for 500 of your closest friends? But it turns out it's a lot of work, so I feel I really should mention these ladies who are probably hiding in the back, working really hard. But obviously, Rich mentioned Era Rappa, who is our Chief of Staff. But into that mix, I think I should mention Kara Burns, Teresa Antonocci, and Hattie Murray. So, ladies, thank you so much for coming together. And also, most keenly, I want to thank all of you for your support. Is really important. So the good news is that millions of people come to our website every month to read our material and see what we're talking about. The not so good news is not every one of them is a paid subscriber. I'm sure none of you in this room fit that description. But as a result, what we need to do is fill that gap with fundraising activities like tonight's dinner. So I'm here to tell you that we set a new record tonight. So the governor was citing all the record things that Florida does. Another record for us, this is our 12th year having these dinners, is we hit an all-time record. We did $2 million tonight, so thank you. In fact, we're so grateful, we're going to invite you all to our next dinner party, which is in the Big Apple, if it's still there, in New York. The sign is up there. Yeah, so the Waldorf Astoria, mark your calendars, October 29th, 2026. Hope to see you there. Last night I was at a dinner and George Will was speaking, and he made a comparison between the U.S. Marine Corps and National Review. And I'm like, wait, what? We think of ourselves as the happy warriors, but I don't know that we're Marines. But he went on to make a couple of very salient points. One was that, like the Marines, National Review is at the point of the spear that is first to defend liberty. That was kind of an insight that I agreed with. And we went on to also say that, like the Marines, National Review is a force multiplier by leading a coalition of the conservative movement. So all that resonated with me. I thought, well, I hadn't thought about it that way. We don't think of ourselves as being that brave, but we are certainly proud of our heritage as masters of the written word, and certainly very much enamored of the power of ideas. But we also think about the future. We've been celebrating a lot tonight about our history, but you should know we're also thinking very strategically about our future. And we know that we need So we know going forward that it's important for us to expand our editorial voice into a broader audience, to a new audience, and most importantly, to the next generation of Americans. So to fund that effort, we're announcing, we waited 70 years to do this. We're a conservative organization, so we do things deliberately and cautiously over time, but we're announcing a mission campaign, and to fund a digital-first multimedia enterprise that will take a little bit of money to make that happen. We're hoping that you will be part of that and join us in that effort. We're in the quiet period, so I was going to whisper into the microphone, but then I would start to look like Joe Biden and didn't want to do that. But please join us in this effort. If you have interest in helping us, by all means, reach out to us. We'll be contacting you as well. I guess in about 2 weeks, Bill Buckley would have turned 100. And just before his 30th birthday, he decided to put together a magazine. So one more time to wrap up our evening, you could join me in a toast to Buckley's centennial and to National Review's 70th anniversary. Cheers. I'm going to turn it back to Charlie Cook. Charlie, you still there?
All right. Well, it falls to me to close us out, so I have a few housekeeping items here. As Brian noted, National Review's next dinner will be held in New York City, which I must say is admirably optimistic, in that, well, not only does it assume that New York City will exist next year, but I must ask you, please save the date and perhaps some tinned food and canned water in case we have to call on you for supplies. I'd like to draw your attention to National Review's birthday cake, which has been wheeled in at the back of the room, I'm told. You can't have any, we just wanted you to see it. And with that, thank you all for coming to our dinner. And I'd like to invite you to get up, move over to the next room where there's an open bar, or as the economists among us like to call it, a moral hazard. Good night.